Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 143, The Electric Universe.
Jeff, could you do that again, but a little less energy? It's a little too. You're like up here. You're like at 11.
I'm over.
I want it
like 2.
Yeah, bring it down. Bring it down.
Okay.
Too exciting. And action.
Episode 143, The Electric Universe.
Nailed it.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build.
Welcome back. As always, I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram, and I'm here with
Michael Miller.
And today we're talking about the very exciting scientific theory of the electric universe. Now, I'm kind of ashamed that I've not heard of this until very recently, but I was actually put onto a YouTube documentary from a group called the Thunderbolts Project. And it is a group of I believe historians, or at least people who specialize in mythology, plasma scientists, physicists, who are looking at the universe in this way called the electric universe. And it's sort of a different view of modern cosmology. Now, the real reason we're getting into this is we're going to talk a little bit about the theory, just enough so someone like Michael could understand it, so the audience would definitely get it.
So Jeff only discovered this very recently, and I've been introduced to it as of about a minute and a half ago. So I am totally clueless. But Jeff,
listen, I thought about texting you at least once this week.
Jeff is going to explain it, and then we're both going to expound.
Okay, so in brief, the idea of the electric universe is this idea that the way we look at the modern universe is slightly flawed because there's something that we're not seeing that is all over space. Electricity. It's all over space. It travels between solar systems, between galaxies, and that big, vast void of space where there is absolutely nothing. Until recently, we've come up with this thing called dark matter we think is there, but we don't know what it is. We can find gigantic electromagnetic fields, but they're around nothing.
What do you mean they're around nothing?
So, like if you would look visually or through a radioscope, all you could see is a magnetic field.
Okay, so no physical object that you can discern.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so the idea of the electric universe is that the way we look at the modern solar system, the modern universe, is not completely correct. And now this is a relatively new theory, and I'm not trying to convey this as science fact, but
well, that's so theory that pretty much.
Well, theory when you get into science, it doesn't quite mean the same thing as when me and you say a theory to each other, because a theory in science is something that has been pushed back and forth and questioned and studied for a long time, like the theory of gravity. There's a lot of evidence behind the fact that there's gravity. So typically,
but we also call it a law of nature, a law of gravity.
No, there is no law of gravity.
There's no law of gravity? No, it's not referred to as that?
It is a theory of evolution. When something has been really well studied.
So when does it become a law? Like the laws of physics. Gravity isn't a law of physics?
No. And it's actually not quite right. We know gravity isn't right. So
what do you mean? What?
Yeah.
What do you mean it's not right?
It doesn't work.
Okay, I'd like to interrupt your presentation for just a moment to get an explanation about that.
So if I drop an apple from the top of a cliff, what happens?
Yeah, it falls.
And that is?
Gravity.
Correct.
Okay.
Or that's to the best of our knowledge, what we consider gravity.
Yes.
And it's very consistent on Earth. You can drop any object. It will reach what we call terminal velocity.
Correct.
And at that point, it won't speed up anymore, but it's going pretty darn fast. hence the term terminal. If you're going that speed when you hit the ground, it's going to probably hurt you.
Let's be fair. That terminal velocity is a large variable. For instance, as Mythbusters displayed, the whole thing, like what happens if you drop a penny off of the Empire State Building?
It will not drop at the same rate as an elephant.
Exactly.
Yes.
It will drop at about 65 miles an hour.
Depending on the mass of the two objects that are falling.
Specifically referring to a penny. It'll fall at about 65 miles an hour. So it's only going to hurt a person as much as a penny moving at 65 miles an hour can do. So what they did is they created basically they took a staple gun and they jammed a penny in it and found out a way they could fire a penny out of a staple gun.
Yeah.
And that's about as fast as it'll fall. And it's just like, ow, you hit me with a penny.
Okay.
Versus me dropping a brick from the Empire State Building. That terminal velocity is different, but also the mass is different. So subsequently,
Yeah, it's called physics. But now on Earth, it seems very consistent and completely logical, and that's where you maybe come to this idea that there's a law of gravity. The problem is if you start extrapolating gravity throughout the universe, it does not always work. And the one thing that pestered people since the time of who first found Mercury? Was it Newton?
Not sure.
It might have been Newton. It was after him, but they found this planet called Mercury. And the problem is they could not explain its movements based off of gravity.
Do they have to?
Yes, because if gravity existed as a universal constant, as was believed, then it would have to have the same effect on everything. Now...
but doesn't gravity works off of mass though, and Mercury has a different mass.
It has a different mass, but we have an idea of what the mass of Mercury is. We have an idea of what the mass of the sun is. And the problem is the way it moved.
The math doesn't add up.
It moves counterintuitive to gravity.
Okay.
And this was later explained by Einstein in the theory of relativity.
Okay.
So the theory of relativity sort of explains the nuances, and it's this idea of the bending of space and time is actually what's occurring. And at a much smaller level, you see the effects of gravity. And obviously they are dependent upon the massive objects. It's the idea, and we've talked about this a little bit in the show before. If you have a humanoid from a planet with greater mass, two humanoids meet somewhere at a place with a gravity like Earth, whoever has on average, people from the planet with more mass would be stronger.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's not quite right, gravity. And it was actually explained by Einstein. But one of the things is...
So what did Einstein think about gravity? Like, does he believe it's just a theory?
No. Well, everyone is. The theory is... To laymen means it's this conjecture. To scientists means it's a well-studied field.
Allow me to modify my statement so as to more accurately represent what I mean and to put it in terms of a conversation we can work around as opposed to arguing definitions. Yeah. Did he think about it as a malleable thing as opposed to a law?
Exactly. And that's,
see, I dropped it into a yes or no question. Yes. That's what I meant.
And so essentially his thought was really what happens is mass causes a bending in space and time.
Okay.
And so you have more variables than just the actual movement that can be affected because of the bending. The bigger, the heavier the object, the more mass there is.
Okay.
And it wasn't verified, I don't think, until like the early 2000s where they could actually get enough evidence to really verify that it was correct. It was several years after he theorized the theory of relativity before they had enough evidence to say, yeah, it actually works for Mercury, which was the thing that he was trying to solve.
Okay. So he didn't solve it in his lifetime.
Well, he created the theory, and maybe it was near the end of his lifetime, but I know it was several years after he had done it before we could really create the experiments needed to verify it.
Fair enough.
Now, but it's all based off the theory of relativity, which was, once again, a pretty well looked at thing. But now...
So to go back to what you were originally saying, that gravity is malleable, but it's malleable based on relativity, which still makes me think that based on the math of being able to explain it, that it should be a law as opposed to a theory.
The thing is, a law means absolute in science, which means that in the whole universe where we know like 1/10 of 1% of everything,
right, I think that might be generous.
But you know what I'm saying, though? There's so much we don't know. The reason it's left as theory is because we don't absolutely believe we know.
Okay.
And when the few times we do, we're usually wrong. You know, like everyone believed there were land bridges that connected Africa to South America. You know, and that's how you would get fossils on both sides of it. And the people who came up with plate tectonics were called insane. Well, obviously, there's a lot of evidence on Earth of plates moving, and ask someone who lives in the Himalayas. They're colliding.
Yeah. Pangea.
Yeah.
That's why we have stuff like that where
things are shifting and moving around.
Here's one fossil, and we've clearly found his brother on a continent right on the shore, 3,000 miles away. So clearly there was a bridge.
Yes, obviously there was a bridge that fell off.
And his brother went across the bridge, and then they were separated. It was very tragic.
Yes. And we went, oh. Okay.
Dinosaur brother.
Now,
I know we totally tangented so far off. So getting back to the
well, actually, you're bringing me to the sun, which is an important thing in the electric universe.
Because bringing you to Dinosaur Brothers. How'd you get to the sun?
Because I ignored everything that you said after I was last
fair enough.
Now, the electric universe will state that the problem with Einstein's theory of relativity and modern cosmology is we miss electricity and currents of electricity that flow through space. And it could, if they're correct, it could explain what dark matter is. It could explain why the sun is not a nuclear reactor. There are nuclear explosions that happen in the sun, but according to the electric theory is what you'd expect to see is if the sun was a nuclear reactor that somehow was designed to last for a long period of time, in the middle, the core of the sun should be the hottest part.
Okay.
And we can actually measure the temperature of the sun going relatively deep. I don't know if we can go all the way to the core at the point, but actually the hottest part of the sun is actually the corona, which is the outer shell.
See, I find that on a really, really hot day, I don't mind drinking a Corona. So, that makes sense.
Yes, because it's the connection to the hot.
Of course.
And so it starts leading to this idea where
that was helping, right?
Yes, where everything's connected via electromagnetic fields. Earth has an electromagnetic field which allows it to bend electrical currents around it. So when a solar storm comes, most of it gets deflected around Earth. Some of it will break through, but you don't get completely bombarded like if you'd be on a planet like Mars that got whacked in a funny way and it blew off its atmosphere and destroyed its radiation belt. But it's our electromagnetic field around Earth which holds that in place. There's a gigantic field around Jupiter, around the sun. And they'd even argue, and one of the more interesting things that they found was NASA recently landed a probe on a comet. And what's a comet?
A piece of debris flying through the universe. I don't know exactly what it's made of.
And we believe it's largely ice.
Really?
Balls of ice. And the thing that's usually described as the tail of a comet is because it's close to the sun and it's starting to melt some of the ice. And it could be inner ice or a complete ice ball. It's probably a mixture, but it's the ice melting which causes the streak we see in the sky.
See, but by that logic, wouldn't after enough time it disappear to nothing?
Yes.
And
by that logic, yes. And I would think most comet scientists would say that would happen.
So how is it that we have like Halley's Comet, which has been around for God knows how long?
How big was the ball a million years ago?
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, but the argument from the electric universe people is nothing different than an asteroid. It has a large elliptical orbit, but the thing is, it's electrically charged. And so, due to these arguments, NASA actually launched a probe to go land on a comet that was passing by. And what happened was, the idea was they'd fire a giant metal claw to grab onto the comet and then reel in the probe. And there was yeah.
Really?
Yes. And
it seems like a a video game or something.
Yes, it seems like a video game, but it works. But there was a prediction saying from the Electric Universe people that if you fired a metal claw to grab onto a comet, because it's charged with electricity, you would see a flash before the bigger impact of it grabbing onto the rock.
Okay.
Which was actually verified. So there are some interesting things that are out there in the universe that can be explained along the ways that that giant rift canyon that we can see on Mars, it matches up with an electrical impact, not erosion. And there's actually evidence that even the Grand Canyon on Earth was at least in part created by an electrical discharge hitting the Earth, not.
Really?
Yes. And because what happened was this mythology guy came to this core conclusion that people thousands of years ago must have seen stuff in the sky that we couldn't see today.
Like, what do you mean? Just like heavenly bodies, movement, light?
Yeah, light. And he didn't explain what it was because he didn't know, but he came back to certain images that are cross-cultural from like 10,000 years ago or something like that, a long time ago. And these things all led into Zeus, into Thor, into all, major deities for every religion in the world. And a lot of them deal with this very symbol that's a circle. And what it really looks like, and what happened was a physicist was at a conference where they were talking about it. And he said that matched up exactly with what like an electrical charge would look like in an arc. And they think there was some massive electrical event that happened like 10,000 years ago or so, which had this influence, which sort of created a universal symbol that showed up in places that had no actual communication. And as they started delving into the science, the plasma scientists and the physicists start putting together all of these different ideas of how the universe is really connected through charges. And actually, maybe even the galaxy didn't form the way we thought it did. Suns don't form the way we think they are. They are not actually nuclear reactors. They are these giant balls of electricity that form up on these strings of electromagnetic activity, which you could argue if you look at certain stellar bodies where stars are being formed.
My wife has a stellar body.
Well, she could be highly electrical.
She gets a charge out of me.
Oh, jeez. But they can see.
You know, if we're going to war on puns, I'm going to keep going.
Yes, that's why I'm going back to science. But you'll see like these, it's like a string of stars, and usually near the air, and in the area where there's usually what they would argue is the most electrical activity is where the largest mass of the biggest stars are. And there's even been some weird science where there are two galaxies that are colliding, but the redshifts didn't make sense. And a physicist actually lost her ability to use the telescope at the school she's in because she wrote that the redshift might not be a distance explainer the way we thought it did. It might have more to do with energy output or a combination thereof, because the redshifts for both of these should have been the same.
Now, what is the redshift? I've heard that term before, but I'm not exactly sure.
So right now we look at redshift as redshift and blueshift as a way to tell if something's moving away from us or towards us, and because of that, we can kind of determine the age of the distance of an object. I'm sorry.
So is this like a light thing?
This is like a light thing. So like if you look at the color you see of let's say Betelgeuse is actually shifted to the red. So it's redder than it would actually be, and they say it's because of distance. Her hypothesis, and I could be getting this slightly wrong, would be it's actually the age of the star, not the distance. And so there's a lot of arguments going on. It's a new science intruding in on old science, but it's very fascinating because it kind of led me into a discussion with actually my wife. You know, it's like in my game world, I've always had magic as this thing, you know, this force of the universe. And maybe it works off of electromagnetics. You know, maybe that's kind of the writing force that it connects the universe together so you can, you know, go through it to grab something to create it for yourself, you know, and maybe that's how magic's actually created in my universe is through people's ability to tap into this electromagnetic field, which would make Magneto really powerful in my universe. But yeah, no, so I mean, that's really one of, I think, a very exciting thing, but it kind of leads you to some interesting things that you can play with world building wise, and to me, this is where I like to use science, where I like to use nature, is to inspire me, even if I don't necessarily even use the ideas I think of. I like to know that, there are ways that you can use this stuff. For example, one of the things that they found recently is they believe, the makeup of our solar system is maybe not as we thought there was like rules that insisted where the orbits of planets are and where the size of the gas giant is going to be in the further out, and you're going to have smaller planets, rockier planets as you come in, and they've proven that wrong. Some of the planets that they've detected so far they have what they call hot Jupiters, which are these supermassive gas giants in the orbital ring of Mercury. And because of the mass of them in the sun, they are exceptionally fast moving, and essentially their atmospheres are on fire. I mean, I guess it's a pretty amazing thing. And if we could ever see one physically,
how do you define an atmosphere? Because is that just talking like, the outside of the planet is on fire, i.e. like the sun? But I would, for me, I mean, I don't know the scientific definition of an atmosphere, but I would think that it would mean that there's barriers between.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So does that include? Is that defined by gases or air or? I mean, obviously, you could say, on Earth it's air. Well, air is a gas. It's made up of a
combination
bunch
of
gases. It's a whole.
Yeah.
That's what I was about to say.
So
it's a bunch of gases.
It's the limit. The atmosphere is the limit of where the gases. Gravity has an effect to hold the gases together.
Okay. So effectively, all planets can have an atmosphere. If they don't have gases floating around the outside, then they don't.
It's just much less dense. Like Mars has an atmosphere. It's just very thin. Definitely Jupiter has one because it's a gas giant. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe there's no rocky stuff in there. I don't know. I would assume there is somewhere, but who knows? Maybe it's just molten stuff transitions to gas. I don't really know because we can't see it deep enough into it to know. We can kind of see the surface of Venus, so we know it has a very thick atmosphere. But atmosphere plays a very important role in a planet. But the idea is you have this giant, a whole bunch of they found a whole bunch of these giant, what they call hot Jupiters. They're actually really easy to find because they cause a wobble in the sun.
And, what do you mean wobble in the sun?
So the way we find planets is we look for suns aren't stationary at the center of a solar system. They are affected by the gravity of the things within the solar system. And so the more things that are within their solar system, it will create a wobble. And that's how we find planets.
Oh, yeah. We talked about this when we were talking about our I don't know if it was a planetary episode. We talked about this.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the dual sun.
Yeah. And so it's the exact same way where the center of both suns will rotate in a dual sun thing. And when you have a big giant planet right next to the sun, it will wobble more. Now, it's not going to wobble outside of its own circle, essentially, but it's still moving. And they can detect the move of and that's how we can detect planets out there. Sometimes you can catch them in front of the sun if the suns are close enough, but that's much more difficult to do. And we've done a few that way as well, too. But I think those are more once we believe there's one there, we just intently watch until we can hopefully capture a dark spot moving across.
Okay. So I'm going to try to reel us back in, getting back to the original point of the electric universe. How does this, are you ready to tie this back into world building?
Well, I had just started to, but then you pulled me back into science.
Sorry.
So I was talking about how you could, it's like for someone like me where magic is a force of the universe, not something supernatural. To me, maybe it is explained by the ability to control electromagnetics. So your ability to tap into or manipulate electromagnetics could allow you to perform extraordinary feats because you are, in theory, connected to everything in the universe when you are tapped into an electrical charge. It would lead to the idea of what a lot of gaming companies do is they'll create these areas of high and low mana. Maybe it's areas of increased magnetism or decreased magnetism based off of what's around there. Possibly if you could disconnect a mage from the, put him in a static free room, could he cast a spell?
Well, if you do that, the idea is you'd want to prevent them from being able to conduct electricity, ergo lose their magnetic force, and then you would stop their ability to cause magic. And the other thing is not playing with these elliptical orbits. Let's take a planet like Earth, right? Or like Middle Earth. Let's take one with magic.
With magic already.
Yeah.
Let's take an established magical place.
Yes. But let's say you change the orbit. So it's now, instead of a nearly cylindrical orbit, you have an egg-shaped orbit. So what would the effects be? So, when winter's coming, maybe that's when the barbarian hordes actually come out, because you're furthest from the sun, you have less influence with the electromagnetics of the sun, ergo maybe magic as an overall force on your planet greatly weakens the further you get away, and then increases as you come closer. So like you could have the sort of French-German war story like we have here on Earth, but one's magical, one's not, and it's with the tides of magic with the orbit of the planet being along that. Well, we always do better in winter because we suck at magic, and they always kick our butts during the summer because, well, they're magical beings and evil and apostate, so we must kill them. And we'll someday win this war, but it's gone on for 54 centuries. Or even on a place like Earth, when are periods of time on Earth that, we draw connections to like groups like fairies, like classical, like Irish types of fairies, usually in the summer and winter.
Really? I would have thought more like
around the solstices.
I would have thought spring and fall, just because of the nature of them being nature-bound creatures.
Well, they are. But the argument being,
this is just me pointing out that I don't know a whole heck of a lot of fairy mythology. Not anything, Jeffrey.
I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud?
You said that aloud again.
You don't know that.
I just heard it.
You said it again. But even on Earth, where we don't have this precise circulation, we're not a precise circle orbit around the sun. It's slightly flattened, and where that flattening happens actually slightly moves as the orbit keeps going around. So the idea is maybe on even a place like Earth, where you have a nearly circular, there are these 2 times of the year where you're just slightly closer, and then magic's slightly stronger. So your cultures who use magic, rituals would naturally gravitate to those times. And maybe it's 4 times a year. Maybe it is on the solstices and the equinoxes. Play with it however you want to, but, thinking of the universe as a whole, and you don't really even need the electricity as part of the explanation. I find that fascinating because that's from nature, and it's a possible way to explain stuff. I mean, and moving further into time, you get into science fiction. Maybe the way we start traveling interstellarly is not through ships, but through electricity. Since the Earth is connected to the entire universe via electromagnetic fields, maybe we figure a way to push ourselves through those fields, maybe transformed into energy as we go with it to come out somewhere else. This also kind of ties back into cultures that have like ley line kind of magic, where people could appear or disappear or fly along ley lines.
I hear tell that you might have something like that going on in some of your fiction.
I've heard of no such rumors.
Oh, okay, then I must be wrong.
Rabble.
I must be wrong. Rabble. Can I share a piece? I think we've talked about it before on this show.
We probably have. Go ahead.
Okay, so there's a part in Jeff's fiction, in his. I don't know if you actually talk about this in the book, but you have talked. You've talked about. You know what? I'll tell you when you talk.
There's
about
actually
this.
A reference.
You
in the
talked
book.
about this in either one
Elves?
of the culture elves, or either one of the culture episodes, or one of the. I want to say.
I think
we were talking about geography, so
we were brainstorming
logical.
this. We were brainstorming the Siren.
That yes, that one. But so if you guys don't remember, because I'm remembering and I'm just talking about it aloud, or thinking about it aloud rather, because talking aloud is always that way, as opposed to
Thinking internally doesn't work nearly as good on podcasts.
Yeah, no, not as good.
And Mike and I aren't good at holding back, which makes us very good at doing this.
So there's areas in Jeff's world that ley lines have gotten weaker, at least when we were discussing this. He was talking about it in time periods. And they were stronger at one point, but they've gotten to the point where they're weaker, and there's water in certain locations. Now, those locations happen to be in ley line areas. Am I explaining it wrong?
No, you're nailing it. You're nailing it.
And there are elves that use these pools of water basically to teleport. They go into the water and they come out of the water in another location, but it's because of using the ley line, they may not necessarily view it that way or understand it that way, but that's what's occurring. It's basically a conduit.
And in a way, it works retroactively with the electric universe thing because water conducts electricity very well as well. And maybe it's almost like a portal.
Well, I'd argue that one.
You would argue that one?
Yeah.
Why would you argue that
Because I'm an electrician.
one? So if I...
Distilled water at its core doesn't conduct electricity.
I'm talking about water in nature, dude.
Well, okay. I'm just saying you said
not distilled water. Yes, it's because of the particles.
It's because of the particles in the water.
Yes.
That's why it's conducted.
But actually, I do like to hit science for fair, so it's fair that you explain that it's actually the particles.
I only said that because we had so much science
I'm
in the episode.
ready to put you out in a puddle and connect my car.
I'm going to give myself a second point.
Well, how do you get any points?
I get a point for that because I just out-scienced you.
Wait, then how come I have 0 points when I've been out-sciencing you for about 30 minutes?
Because it's expected when you watch a documentary on a subject that you know more about that subject than I do. Because I didn't watch the documentary.
About stuff like gravity, which weren't even being talked about. Because
right, because I wanted to get a word in edgewise.
Now, did you?
I'm giving myself a third point.
Oh my god, this game is so big.
I'll give you half a point.
And then he's going to take it away because
no, I won't take it away. But if you hit me with something good, I'll give you 1.5 points, getting you to 1 below my score.
Okay, because remember, I was also talking about like the theory of relativity.
Now you're just trying to earn points.
That's right.
I'm not going to give it to you.
Because you're a cheater.
I'm not a cheater.
Okay,
that's what happens when you give me control of the scoreboard.
Damn whiteboards.
So the score is 0.5 point, Jeffrey, to 3 points, Michael.
Yes.
And you guys missed me getting the first point. I gave myself that point off the get-go.
Yeah, I don't even remember him giving himself that point.
I just put it up there for being cool today.
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting about the electric universe is that it creates these commonalities. It helps explain that there are some commonalities that leak between cultures who never even interact. And you can kind of see this if you look at symbology and ancient symbology of cultures. I mean, I don't know what kind of loser would do that, but
I think you do that, Jeff.
Shh, don't turn around and look at my bookcase.
I don't think it's very nice.
Don't look at my bookcase.
Call yourself a loser, but you know.
Don't look at my bookcase. You can't verify that if you don't look at my bookcase.
Oh my God! There's a whole bunch of books back there on science and mythology and the world.
And actually, there's a bunch
of fictional books back there too.
There's at least 2 books on symbology over there as well.
A lot of people that don't own one book on symbology.
Weird.
I do. I might own 2. I do have one. I definitely have one.
But one of the things that is true, though, is there are certain symbols that have been on Earth for a very long time. Like this one that would sort of like a circle with electricity arcing out. The spiral galaxy itself, they actually have modeled in a plasma laboratory. Or even if you take a look at the universe as a whole, and I'm way off subject here. I'm trying to meander back to what I was thinking about.
It's okay.
Symbols. Okay, so if we look at symbols, some of them are, like I said, are very ancient. Some are very new, but some of these symbols do cross between peoples who've never met or could have had the ability to meet. Why do they exist? The electric arc, like I'm saying, that is a fairly universal symbol from a really long time ago. Possibly are things that people can see because ultimately the reasons that people come up with words, they come up with mythology are to explain the universe around them. And if you look at the mythology, like, read ancient Greek mythology, like these people are crazy then, but just understand they're just trying to make it in a way that it makes sense to them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone's always just trying to explain the world around them too.
Yes. And so don't judge too harshly. But definitely consider, if nothing else, things to think about are these common symbols, these common threads that tie together cultures, even if it's in a negative way. I see the dot as the holy symbol that stops words. You see the dot as the great hero that propels into the next language, and we consider each other apostates and try and kill each other for the rest of time.
Makes sense.
Well, that's sometimes how religion works, so.
No,
I know. There's never bad things.
Show me some kind of historical evidence of this. Intolerance from one religion to another. Come on, Jeff.
Now I'm going to ask you to turn around and look back at one of the history books I have.
You got a lot of history books back there.
Yeah.
There's like 5 or 100 of them.
And sometimes as we lose belief in certain ideas, they become crazy to us, but it's because we come up with better explanations. This is one of the things that propels culture forward. This is one of the things that even evolves religions. If you look at an early Christian from like the 4th century AD till today, or even to like the 1st century AD, if that's when it really started, which we believe it's somewhere around there, you're going to see distinctly different versions. And even though they take the same words, it's about your ability to understand and your ability to tie it back. Even someone who would call themselves a fundamentalist today would have been an ultra-liberal whack job 70 years ago or 1,000 years ago, definitely. So, this is just one of those episodes where I'm having fun just sort of exploring around possibilities and ways you can take, and in this case, the electric universe, and just have it give you imagination. Don't feel like you need to tie it in. That is the trick of inspiration. Is it can lead you to something completely crazy that makes no sense, and you end up creating a world that is completely not naturalistic, as I like to call it. So that's fine, but it's the rabbit holes that lead us to the next great world or the next great stories come from strange places.
I think there's one thing that, and we've mentioned this sort of thing on the show before, where really it doesn't necessarily have to be this way, because some people don't necessarily create their worlds from a vacuum, but they create them from a place that is so out of left field that they're self-generating. Whereas most of the time I would subscribe to this school of thought, which is basically expose yourself to as much knowledge as possible, because you're going to find some mythology, some old stories, some science, some literature that inspires you, music, art, something. Jeff, like, I really applaud how much you soak up when it comes to reading and exposing yourself to media and documentaries and classes and webinars, and because I don't do a lot of that stuff. I play a lot of video games. I watch a lot of movies.
But you know what? There's inspiration in those too.
There is, but I have a lot of respect for the way you educate yourself and subsequently how you apply that to world building. Whereas me, while I do consider myself I don't think the term well-read is an appropriate term for me, but that is the most appropriate. I think, good read, kind of read, semi-read.
I've seen a book.
I read more than a lot of people I know, but I don't read anywhere near as much as I would like to or have time to.
Yeah.
If I read as much as I used to, like when I lived in New York, I used to read a lot because I had a 45-minute train ride every day in and out. Yeah. It was great. I would burn through like 2 to 5 books in a month. I loved it.
Yeah.
So I was reading a lot.
Depending on how disruptive the train was.
Exactly. Yeah. And a side note on the real world, I want to throw my heart out to everybody at the Hoboken train station who just suffered that tragedy the other day. I was at work watching little CNN clips, catching it as the news came in, minute by minute, hour by hour. So really horrible, but thankfully, as far as I'm aware right now, I haven't updated myself on this story recently, but I believe there was only one fatality.
One fatality, 100.
Yeah, it was like
114.
Yeah, there's over 100 people injured, but I believe.
But luckily, only one fatality.
Yeah. Unluckily for that family, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So.
But luckily to the society as a whole.
Yeah.
But I mean, too, and I don't know. We could do a whole. That's maybe a whole other episode.
That is maybe an episode where we just talk about how tragedy affects culture.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a Real good one. But
Yes.
But I wanted getting back to my original point. It's just that like I applaud you for, or my original point is, as the listener, expose yourself to knowledge. You know, the more you learn about what's around you, the more you'll discover things, one, that obviously you didn't know before reading that or exposing yourself to it. And you never know where you might find this strange inspiration where you read something or you pick up on something and you're like, whoa, that gives me an idea. Or what if I turned that just a little on its head? And then you can... You know, it's like seeds. You know, you take something really small and you turn it into something amazing and large.
Who knows how much inspiration I don't know inspired me when I do my stuff. Because, you know, it's like I have a great breadth of knowledge, you know, because I have all of these different fascinations.
See, mine's a width.
Yes.
Mine's a width. My knowledge is not deep, but it's a wide.
Yes. Well, that's mine too. I have a lot of knowledge over a lot of different esoteric things.
But I'd say that you know a
you,
lot about a lot of things too. Though.
Well, it also depends on how currently I'm active. Like this, I've been like watching videos for a couple of days now, and it's currently superficially up there.
Yeah.
And I can sometimes get back to some of that information, but my brain recall is not so good.
I would say your brain recall is very good.
Not as good as I need it.
Fair enough.
But then again,
Idiot.
yes.
Simpleton.
Simpleton.
I love that word.
Yes, that is a good word.
That's a good word. Is there anything else you want to say in conclusion with the Electric Universe?
No, just to go along
world building
and agree with Mike for a second. I know, huh?
I'm glad we're recording this.
I am great.
All right, I'm going to give Jeff 1.5 points for that. You got about a minute and a half to get one more point.
Yeah.
That was great. I almost want to give you 2.5 points for that. That was great. I want to agree with Michael in that I am great. I'm going to give you the extra point. It's a tie score.
Okay. So the thing to keep in mind is, you know, it's like the reason I do so much reading, whether it's fiction or nonfiction or playing games or whatever I do, everything I do is about inspiration. Because it's like, and for me, it's like when I do a framework world, I have this mechanic of magic, which I don't kind of know how it fits in, but now I maybe see a way where it might. Maybe
where you shoehorn it into place based on something you can support.
Because this fits in with what I'm doing, and it makes sense to me. I think it's cool. So I want to be hip and cool, like all people who have 2 books on symbology. So yeah, that's really where it's going. So.
Do you have a world builder task for the day?
Sure. I want you to create an entire universe based on electricity.
Maybe something a little smaller, maybe a little smaller.
Bring it down some.
Bring it down some. You're at
like
you're at like 11. Can we bring it down to 2?
You're like 54,000.
Right, yeah.
The dial goes up to 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
Up to 10
or 11.
We'll bring it down to 2.
Yeah. Okay. So no, just find some, you know, go onto YouTube, find a strange theoretical or philosophical thread, just like burn through it and just write down some inspirations, just little things. And the thing is, you don't need to understand it perfect. We're not looking to become scientists. And some of us might actually be scientists. So, you know, this is separate from, you know, prepping for your job. You're looking for inspiration in life. Look at it from nature. Look at it from, you know, the games you're playing. Think about it. You know, what's interesting about the world? What's not interesting about the world of this game I'm in? You know, maybe it's just the guns because you're playing something lame like Destiny, or if you're playing something really cool like Skyrim, then everything is cool.
You know, I play both of those games, right?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Is this the inspirational episode?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
Yeah.
So because I was going to say, because I didn't know if you were leading into what will be the next episode. Please cut all this out.
It is the inspiration of world building, is finding inspiration.
Okay.
So
do you want to keep that line in? Because I was about to say something about inspiration.
Well, if you can top it, try.
I don't know if I can. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, the basic gist here is that this whole concept is about inspiration. It's all about trying to find it in different ways. While the entire episode, if you listen to it again, and I know you're going to want to, it's mostly science and theory and fact, but it's all about where you find the energy to write.
Yeah.
See what I did there with the energy?
Nice.
To write your stuff.
all electrical.
It's all electrical.
Which makes Michael one of the most powerful beings on the planet.
It does, because I manipulate electricity all the time.
Wizard.
I'm going to go to work. I am an electric wizard.
You need new business cards.
I do. Well, the thing is, that's actually will absolutely be a joke. There was a guy who we hired not too long ago who his LinkedIn stuff said sales alchemist. And we hired him, and he did not help much, and shortly thereafter left the company.
I would have been like, stop trying to turn the lead into gold and turn a freaking wrench.
Yeah, but think about that. Like alchemy, it's BS. Alchemy is BS, and this guy's like, I'm an alchemist.
You didn't. Yeah. So have you turn this lead into gold and you're hired?
No, I'm a sales alchemist. I turn bad leads into good sales.
And that works as good as turning this lead into gold. That would save a lot of time and product.
It reminds me, did you ever see the Simpsons episode where he brings in the spruce moose? He brings in this little model of the plane, and he's like, we'll take the spruce moose. Get in, Smithers. But sir, it's a little model airplane. And he pulls out a gun. He's like, get in.
Okay. Now for the real world
task.
Real world task. Go check out the documentary, and they have a couple. I'll link to the channel and to the specific documentary, but I would suggest to start with this one documentary called Thunderbolt of the Gods, because it kind of talks a little about the mythology side of it, a lot about the science side of it, and then ties it back to the mythology side of it. It's a good place to start, especially from a world builder perspective, because obviously mythology always fascinates every world builder I've met, and even the science fiction guys will get something useful out of this one. So,
and the bonus real world task will be to then go to another webpage and do any kinds of solid reading on Nikola Tesla, and you can thank me for that later.
He is a badass. Nikola Tesla, not Michael.
No, I agree with Jeff. I'm awesome. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil. We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends, and so would they. If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting by showing them Stitcher or iTunes, or, best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.